in this. Please read everything, as some points made earlier are further backed up later on. I see a lot of people who say GoJo wins easily, mainly because of his very OP ability, which is infinity, and Aslo his infinite void. But what I mostly see is people not really understanding how infinity works. Infinite void pretty much negs Naruto. I'm not gonna argue about that. So I'm gonna try my best to counter the main point, which is the infinity around GoJo. Bear in mind, this isn't exactly a how Naruto beats GoJo, but rather a how to bypass GoJo's infinity. I will explain how infinity works to the best of my abilities and show you various ways one can bypass it. Also, I'm an advocate for verse equalization, because it makes things fair all round and prevents petty people from having the advantage. But don't worry, this explanation does not use verse equalization completely. Now, GoJo's infinity is not infinite spaces, but rather infinite fractions of a single space in which GoJo exists in. This is from Zeno's paradox, known as Achilles and the tortoise. Now, as you can see, our man Achilles fails to overtake that bitch of a tortoise despite being a Chad. Why is that, Sue? Zeno explained. Something finite could have an infinite number of fractions to it, including space, which is what GoJo's ability divides to an infinite number of fractions to create distance between an attack and himself. I hope that video explained how infinity works. That was the best and easiest to digest explanation I could get. Now, with that explanation, if you're smart enough, you should be able to see how this ability can be countered. There are only two basic ways to counter. There's other ways to counter it, but I'll explain it as we move on. The first one: your attack must not traverse space. Now, if you're smart, I'm sure the first kind of ability that fits this description would be teleportation. In Naruto, teleportation is classified under space-time ninjutsu. Below is a definition of teleportation, backhand index pointing down, medium dark skin tone, from Wikipedia. As you can see from the definition, anyone that teleports does not traverse the physical space between him, her, it and the target location. Basically, they just pop into whatever space, location as they please, so there is no distance to cover between them and the target. This is the major and less complicated counter to GoJo's infinity. Now, the second counter is a little more complicated and honestly debatable. Probably, your attack must not traverse the space in which GoJo exists in. Now, this one is a more complicated situation, but I'll try my best to explain it. As we know, GoJo's infinity works by creating an infinite distance between him and an attack, meaning that attack must be in the same place as GoJo to be a threat. There are attacks that don't need to exist in the same place as the target to damage the target. Such attacks could be spiritual attacks, or fourth-dimensional attacks, or interdimensional attacks. Spiritual attacks and interdimensional attacks are basically the same. They're attacks that don't exist on the same plane as the target, but can still damage the target. The target and the attack exist on different spaces, hence preventing the logic or rules of the regular plane in which the target exists in, but at the same time overlap the target's plane. An example of such an attack ability would be the Limbo Border Jail, an ability granted to Uchiha Madara by his Rinnegan. This ability fits the description perfectly. The Limbo clones cannot be damaged by Anything existing on the regular plane but at the same time can damage things on the regular plane. There is no space between you or limbo because it's simply not there. If Sasuke tried to use his Amenete-Jakara to switch places with a limbo clone, it won't work because there's nothing to switch places with. It doesn't exist on the same plane as Sasuke. Fourth dimensional, higher dimensional. Attacks are simply attacks that aren't bound by the rules of the third dimension. They aren't bound by space or time and can exist without both of them individually or together as space, time. But basically, for these kind of attacks or people just throw away all logic cause what you would call logic doesn't apply to it, then. I don't really know any attack that can do this, but an example would be an attack that erases space-time. So yeah. Okay, now that I've gone through the basic counters to GoJo's Infinity, let's go even more in depth to how Infinity works. To further open more doors to more counters, as we already know, Infinity creates an infinite distance between GoJo and the attack or attacker. But have you asked yourself on how Infinity is able to know the difference between what is an attack and what isn't an attack? Like for example, if Itadori wanted to hug GoJo, Infinity won't stop him, right? Obviously it won't, but at the same time, if a gun was fired at GoJo, the bullet wouldn't reach him, right? Obviously the answer is yes. An example of this was shown in the manga Backhand Index pointing down medium dark skin tone. As you can see from the scans, a pen and an eraser was thrown at GoJo, but for some reason, the pen did not reach him, but the eraser did, as shown in the last panel. GoJo explains that he used to do this by sensing danger levels, depending on the amount of curse energy in the attack, but obviously this was still easy to counter by simply not using cursed attacks. He wanted to have Infinity be active at all times and still be able to distinguish between what's dangerous or friendly, and he did so by Backhand Index pointing down medium dark skin tone in this page. He explains that not only does he sort dangerous and friendly attacks by the amount of curse energy they have, but now he can sort them by their mass, speed and shape. Also size matters. Now, this takes Infinity to a whole other level. Basically, if an attack has enough mass or is moving fast enough or is shaped to cause damage to GoJo, it simply won't reach him. This is obviously much better than his first method, but as our Lord and personal savior Itachi Sama says, every Jujutsu has a weakness, including Infinity even with its upgrade. I'm going to bring a villain from the Naruto, Boruto verse who has a very simple ability that can perfectly with no errors whatsoever counter Infinity. To help you understand what can counter it, Boruto spoiler. Below his name is Jigen Orishhiki. Yes, this guy, the man, alien god who manhandled Naruto and Sasuke in his weakest form, and the ability that he poses which perfectly counters the upgraded version of Infinity is his chakra rods. I know what you're thinking. What? How can sticks be effective against Infinity? You're probably screaming right now. Well, let me explain. As GoJo said, Infinity now chooses what to let through depending on their mass, speed and shape. That's how the eraser reached him and the pen did not. The same applies to Jigen's Ishiki's rod's backhand index pointing down medium dark skin tone. As Lord Sasuke explains, the rods are initially released in a shrunken state. It's so small that when it hits you, you don't even feel it. Basically it's not dangerous, at least in its shrunken state. And because it's not dangerous, Infinity will not stop it. automatically. Take this scenario. Jigen and GoJo. In fact, he doesn't even see the rods. So he'll probably be expecting to see something released from Jigen, but instantly a dozen rods appear all over GoJo's body, possibly even his head. GoJo dies. Jigen wins. Infinity cannot stop the rods, at least automatically. If GoJo wants to stop the rods, he'd have to do so manually, but even with that he'd also end up stopping the airflow, because the rods basically become part of the air. With that scenario, I hope you now understand what can counter Infinity. If you can find similar abilities, then there's nothing GoJo can do. But I'm not done explaining, there's more to it now. For an attack to be dangerous, mass, size and speed must be sufficient enough to cause damage. As far as I can tell, at least *2* of those must be at a sufficient level before Infinity can counter it. I'm going to use water as an example here. Say I have a water hose that can allow me to increase or decrease the pressure of the water released to the point where it could cut metal. If I increase its pressure, Infinity would stop it with no problem. Why? Because its speed and size meet the requirements to be considered dangerous, but its mass probably isn't. For water to cut through metal, it would have to be compressed at a very small point, giving it a sharp shape and be moving very fast. But also it would need to be a continuous output. From that example, the water's speed and shape makes it dangerous to GoJo, so it won't reach. But if the pressure is reduced, GoJo would be soaking wet because it's not fast enough and it has no dangerous shape. Now let's use paper. If a piece of paper is moving as fast as Sonic or something, I doubt it'll still damage you, because it still isn't shaped dangerously, neither does it have enough mass to be harmful, it's just fast. So you see, at least two of the categories must be met, or at least be at a certain level in order for Infinity to stop it. At least that's as far as I can tell now. What if none of the categories have been met? Would it still be dangerous? Is there such an ability? Well, technically the Limbo Border Jail has none of those. It has no mass because its mass exists on a different plane, the Limbo Realm. It has no speed because it's moving on a different plane, and it has no shape because it exists in a different plane. If you were somehow able to go to the Limbo Realm, then you can say that it now has all those. Another example of something that doesn't have any of those would be energy. Energy in itself has no mass, speed or shape, but can be used to create mass, speed or shape, kinda like the way chakra is used to create fire, or used to amp the speed of Guy Sensei, which increases his mass to the point where he bends space-time. I'm going to be talking about nature energy here. Nature energy exists everywhere, but only a sage can utilize it to benefit him, her. It can't be seen but sensed, as it has no physical form. It has no mass, as it has no physical form, and it has no speed, as it has no physical form, or any form for that matter, but it can be used to create form, or increase the speed or strength of the sage. I believe Frog Kamite could bypass Infinity. What Frog Kamite essentially does is use the natural energy around the sage and the target to create the physical effect of a punch on the target. Assume the Tendo Pain above backhand index pointing up medium dark skin tone is GoJo. Natural energy is already on GoJo, and on Naruto. It's everywhere, not matter what you do. All Naruto has to do use, activate, it on GoJo. And it will have its effect. It doesn't even need to travel to reach the target. All Naruto needs is to be close enough to activate the effects. This is about the only ability of Naruto I can find that can bypass infinity. Maybe if he utilities the chakra of the three tails he could create a genjutsu fog, but I think that's debatable and would only work with verse equalization. I'm just gonna leave a list of abilities that I believe can counter infinity because I'm tired of typing this much. Amenetejakara, teleportation, Naruto Kamui, teleportation, Naruto the hand, 4-dimensional, probably debatable JoJo Limbo, interdimensional, Naruto. Basically GoJo versus Naruto isn't as simple as people claim it is for GoJo to win, as GoJo neither has the speed nor strength to keep up with or damage Naruto. He does have purple, which erases anything in its path, but that's easily evadable by Naruto. His curse technique lapse, blue, can also be escaped by simply being faster. Even a person with no curse energy and just physically fast could do this. His curse technique lapse, red, is the opposite of blue. It's akin to a Shinra Tensei, which Naruto could handle in just his Kyuubi chakra cloak. His curse technique lapse maximum cursed energy output, shitty name BTW, is basically akin to a Chibaku Tensei. It's probably even more destructive because it crushes everything at the center of gravity, but it could probably be resisted by Naruto. If we allow Naruto to have the flying Raijin kunais, then he could easily escape his domain expansion. The infinite void is the only ability that will guarantee his victory. But then again, would he even be able to react to Naruto? He could activate it, and possibly catch Naruto, but then again, what if it's a clone? There's so many possibilities that could go down, so it really depends on the events that happen during their battle. If you read all the way to the end, congratulations, you have no life. By waving hand, medium dark skin tone edit. It's been several months since I posted this, and it seems to have gotten a lot of positive feedback, so I wanna thank all of those who liked this. Also, my knowledge on infinity has increased considerably since making this, and I realized one more way of bypassing it, which is with raw speed basically, since GoJo's mind is what does the calculations for things that approach him to determine whether or not they are dangerous. Being able to move faster than he can think should render infinity useless, because his brain won't be able to calculate how fast or how much mass or the shape of the object approaching to be able to decide whether or not to create the infinity around GoJo before it blitzes him. Just move faster than his brain can think and you're all good. Thumbs up, medium dark skin tone.